Welcome to Day One. I'm Bill Turpey, and I know how to be anxious, but what I don't really understand very well is how to let go and let God. Now, maybe you're the same. Stay with us. Often that he can somehow allow God in the midst of that because he has no control. But it's the little thing.
How do I live with anxiety when I'm so nervous?
Well, and that's the question. How do I live with anxiety? And nervousness is part of it too. Can you really overcome this thing called anxiety? Is it possible, or is it just a trait that we all have?
I think the right answer to that is just have faith. But I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that. I think many Christians will look at that and say, well, you have anxiety because you don't have enough faith. And I don't agree with that. There are all kinds of reasons for anxieties. It could be a spiritual issue, but it also could be a chemical imbalance. That many people struggle with chemical imbalances. And there are lots of ways that God works in our lives. One may be through a therapist or through medication.
So are we saying it's okay to don't be anxious about your anxiety, don't be nervous about your anxiety? I mean, what are we saying?
Well, the gift, there's a gift that God has given all of us to recreate, to recreate, to find ourselves in the midst of anticipating a sunset or a sunrise, and to notice within ourselves the fact that we're not so anxious when we're waiting on something that's going to happen in our lives that's beautiful. We're not as anxious. I'm certainly not when I'm watching a basketball game, wanting to, if I've decided that's what I'm going to sit down and do, I'm not anxious about who's going to win, who the outcome. Michael Jordan's not playing anymore.
So even if it's but even if it's your favorite team, I get excited. I get pumped.
But when we accept the gift of what it means to recreate, perhaps there's some lessons we can learn for how it is we can take positive waiting and apply the lessons of positive waiting to the anxiety that is clearly negative for us.
One of the struggles for me is that often when I'm anxious, and I think it's helpful differentiation between healthy or normal anxiety and that anxiety which we put in a different category, but the anxiety that I have that I could shed frequently comes from my believing that I am more in charge of my life than I truly am, that I have more power than I really do. My anxiety frequently stems from the fact that I believe I'm the center of the universe, and that therefore the world is not revolving around me the way I expect it. And therefore, I think I can shed a lot of anxiety when I will acknowledge that I don't control as much I'd like to think I control, and therefore I can let go of some of that.
So that's this control issue is what we're dealing with here in some sense.
Scripture informs us, be anxious for nothing, and when I think about that scripture, it often gives me a sense of relief to let me know that I don't have to be in control of everything, that there are some things that I can turn over to God in prayer. And sometimes I think we need to spend more time in communion with God to realize that a lot of the things that we're having difficulty in working through that make us anxious are because we have not applied that quiet time within our life to put things in perspective and to be able to be open to what God may be trying to reveal to us and tell us in that quiet time.
I found in my own experience that I'm never free of anxiety, and the kids take the car out, I'm anxious. But I've learned that what I'm anxious about is not the truest thing, that there is a kind of atheistic uncertainty that God is not there. And I've learned to trust the fact that even when the kids are out there with the car, and I can't be with them, God is out there with them.
Frederica Matthews Green helps us wrestle with this issue of anxiety by asking this question.
How can we clear our vision so that we can trust in a God who is capable of meeting all our needs when anxieties are just attacking us so constantly?
So to what degree is God attached to this issue of anxiety? Granted, there is this matter of just a free-floating anxiety, and there can be a medically treatable form of anxiety, but in what sense do God and anxiety have an interface?
That's a really good question. Is it that we're not spending enough time with God? Is it that we are not taking the time that we need with God, with friends, with family, that we get so caught up in our duties that we're forgetting the relationships that are important.
By living in a fast-paced society nowadays, the fast-pacedness does not necessarily come from the things that we value most. It comes from the insignificant things or things that we have deemed necessary within our lives, such as we have to put food on the table, we have to be able to pay bills, and so we need a job. And with that job demanding so much from us, then in some ways we're pulling away from those things that ultimately give us the sustenance to be able to have a job in the first place, that sense of inner peace that we get when we have prayer with God.
I had a day recently at the office where, in trying to juggle various modes of communication, I was online, so I was trying to answer emails. The phone on my desk began to ring, and I answered the phone. And as I was answering the phone on my desk that began to ring, the phone in my pocket, the cell phone, began to ring at the very same time. You want to talk about an anxious moment?
Yes.
That's a multitasking moment.
Multitasking. But by the same token, it was one of those times where each one of those issues, if I just could have handled them one at a time instead of having them all converge at once, perhaps I could have had a more calm and rested response to them.
Miroslav Volf, the theologian, brings God into the equation when he says that the big issues, like death, like horrible accidents and things like that, he can somehow allow God into the midst of that because he has no control. But it's the little things, the small matters, that he gets anxious about because he thinks he can move in there.
Yeah, Jesus, I wrestle with Jesus' statement that look at the lilies of the field and the birds of the air. They aren't anxious. Well, they don't have college tuitions either.
That's right.
But one biblical commentator helped me to understand that passage. He said, if you look long enough at the lilies and the birds, there is a world of carefree providence hidden beneath the anxiety. And to have that kind of vision, our little anxieties float in this sea of God's care.
When I'm feeling quite anxious, I'll just take a few moments and think and pray about that passage. And until, like I've got this deep well of anxiety, until the passage becomes a deeper well and a wider well, that it envelops that anxiety. It's such a blessed relief when God gives that freedom from anxiety. And it is Scripture. It is the Word.
Thank you for your reflections on anxiety. Thank you for being with us on Day 1.